Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. I want to talk about why Whoopi Goldberg was right and wrong about the Holocaust. And then I'm going to ask the question, can black people be racist? Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Excuse me. In a I think Whoopi is in her second week of suspension over a statement she made on The View that race wasn't a factor in the Holocaust. And of course, that it set off a firestorm. And of course, the backlash was she was suspended for two weeks. I'm going to read an article, kind of dissect an article that was written about that. Because I think that in order to understand my statement, why she was both right and wrong about the Holocaust, we also should understand some definitions of what race and racism is. Because I think that plays a part that she was more penalized for a connotation of definition, not actual definition. So let's unpack the article in which that talks about her issues here. I'm not gonna. This is the article, of course, over her suspension and what happened on The View. And it says Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for 2 weeks Tuesday as a co-host of The View because of what the head of ABC News called her wrong and hurtful comments about the Jew and the Holocaust. While Whoopi has apologized, I asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comment. This is total BS, by the way, by the head of the ABC News organization. The entire ABC News organization stands in solidarity with our Jewish colleagues, friends, family, and communities. ABC News President Kim Godwin said in a statement. This is, again, BS politics. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. The suspension came a day after Goldberg's comments during the discussion of The View that race was not a factor in the Holocaust. Goldberg apologized hours later and again on Tuesday's morning episode, but the original remarks drew condemnation from several prominent Jewish leaders. Now, they said that her words were hurtful and harmful, and I'm going to ask why. She said that race was not a factor. I'll get into that, why I'm going to answer that in a moment, but why were they hurtful? And let's not forget that the show is called The View, where you talk about issues. And what I criticize most about the showrunners of The View, that they are really stunting any kind of meaningful back and forth and exchange. In other words, the mere fact that she made the statement was they said was more dangerous or more hurtful. Why? And then couldn't she have made this statement and having a view and then later come to see why her view was wrong? Why couldn't that be more of the discussion and the exchange? But I digress here because it is what it is. So this was her apology. She says, my words upset so many people. What, so many? Okay. Which was never my intention, she said Tuesday morning. I understand why now, and for what I am deeply, deeply grateful, because the information I got was really helpful and helped me to understand some different things. Now, to me, this is a standard, apology tour. However, I don't understand why this statement could not be taken for face value. In other words, you make a statement, someone else brings a statement, and you say, hey, you know what? I see that point. Like I say, I digress. All right. It says Goldberg made her original comments during the discussion on the show Monday about a Tennessee school board banning of Mars, a Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel about the Nazi death camps during World War II. She said the Holocaust was not about race. It's about man's inhumanity to other men. I'll talk about this statement, why it's both right and wrong. Okay? She says, I misspoke, Goldberg said on the opening of Tuesday's show. The flare-up over Goldberg's remarks this week highlighted the enduring complexity of some race-related issues. Now, this is true, including the widespread but strongly contested notion that only people of color can be victims of racism. Now, this is very true. Okay? But we need to also understand why it is an issue. I'm going to skip down because I'm not going to get into all of the thing. Here is this is a Jewish rabbi response. He says Jewish people at the moment are feeling besieged. Okay, Greenback said. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Associated Dean of the Simeon Weizsäcker Center, praised Goldberg for being outspoken over the years on social issues, but said he struggled to understand her statement on the Holocaust. The only explanation that I have for it is that there is a new definition of racism that has been put out there in the public recently that defines racism exclusively as the targeting of people of color. And obviously history teaches us otherwise, Cooper said. Everything about Nazi Germany and about the targeting of Jews and about the Holocaust was about race and racism. This is the unfortunate, unassailable historic fact, he said. Now, I want to talk about this right here because I think this is very important. Because what he just said is true, but before we do that, let me go and let's define from the dictionary what racism is. Let's define this. Okay. This is Merriam. Oh, let me get my thing here. Merriam Webster, right? Definition of race. It says, 1, a belief that race is a fundamentally determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. All right, look at number 2, the systematic, and this is important, oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and political advantage of another. Now, I want to talk about this here. All right, let me read one more thing here. This is what's called the history, right? Etymology of the word. Now, I want to read this. Then I'm going to come back and really unpack this here. Racism and races appear to be words of recent origin, with no citations currently known that would suggest these words were used prior to the early 20th century. The fact that the words are fairly new ones not prove that the concept of racism did not exist in the distant past. Things may have words to describe them before they existed. Spaceships, for example. Now, I'm going to stop there because I think you get the point. Let me go back because I want you to hear something that he said, which now I want to go into. He says, the only explanation I have, this is a Jewish rabbi in response to Whoopi's statement. The only explanation I have is that a new definition of racism. Now see, I don't know what he means by that. The word itself is new. although the concept, right, the concept could be used, but we get to that in a moment. A new definition of racism that has been put out there in the public recently defined racism exclusively as targeting of people of color. Now, here's where we need to unpack this. What happened to the Jews? So here's the question. Was it racism? And this is what Whoopi said, in that what she was saying was it was inhumanity. Now, she might have went off by saying, she thought it was white people being bad to other white people. But let's even go back when we talk about the Jew. I'm a Christian, and so I can come from a Christian perspective, from a biblical point of view, that throughout history, the Jews have been targeted. Okay. Now, so the rabbi, I'm going to say, could be both right and wrong. So when we kind of go back to one of the first abuses, or you can say even racism, how it is defined. Does it apply to the Jew? Right? So when we read the definitions, then yes, because the Egyptians enslaved the Jews, right, thousands of years before the Atlantic slave trade. Okay? Thousands of years before the Atlantic slave trade. So that you had Pharaoh, who looked at a particular race of people and said, we're going to make them slaves. All right? So when the rabbi says a new concept, now the word racism during that time didn't exist. But just as we read in the dictionary, it says, though the word may not have existed, the definition does and did exist. So right there in the book of Exodus, we see a 400-year enslavement by the Egyptians to the Jew. Later on in their history, we see a man by the name of Haman, who tried to annihilate the entire Jewish race. Okay, the entire Jewish race. In other words, he targeted the race. He hated the race. Now, that was amazing. He hated the race and tried to annihilate them. Okay? So there we see two examples in the past. And by the way, these examples were thousands of years before the Atlantic slave trade. So the only difference that we see is that the word racism is what's new, not the definition. And this is where Whoopi could be mixed up, or a lot of black people are mixed up, because the word racism is a word that comes into play during the Atlantic slave trade. And this is where the rabbi is saying here is that the only explanation that I have is that there is a new definition of racism that has been put out there in the public that defines racism exclusively as the targeting of people of color. And this is where he is right. But this is also where Whoopi is right, because what has happened, that the word racism, okay, came into play during the Atlantic slave trade, and it was exclusively used to define the oppression of the black race by the white race. Okay? And that the term racism, of course, as with a lot of these words, were developed in an academic setting. So in one respect, where Whoopi went wrong was that not looking at were the Jews during the Holocaust, but not only the Holocaust, but their entire history. that they share with black people, that yes, they experience racism in the same way. But not the use of the word, because the word racism is a modern term, but not the definition. And that's important. So I want to ask a question, because then, because of this academic word, you have some black people who will say, for this reason, black people cannot be racist. Why? Because they said that the term racism that was used, let me go back and show you that again, that the word racism, listen here, the systematic oppression of a group to a social, economic, and political advantage of another. Now, some people will say that the term racism then applies only to white people. They're racist. Why? Because they have the power. And then thus black people cannot be racist because they never had the power. And I want to say that might be true during the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century, but not true today. But it's also not true if you say a person or a person or a group of person that is at any time in a position of power, and then use said power to target a group, a person, a group or persons, a group of persons, I'm sorry, out of a sense of superiority, and oppress them by, again, the very definition of racism. Then yes, anyone can be racist if they fall in that category. In other words, if I, as a black man, say, I don't like this white woman, and then I oppress her and I make her a slave, can I be racist? Absolutely. So with the strict definition of the textbook, when we say that black people cannot be racist, well, it existed for a particular time when black people were oppressed, slaves, and under Jim Crow laws. But they certainly can be racist at any point in time if they are in positions of power. So that's why I say that Whoopi Goldberg was both right and wrong about the Holocaust. That, as the Jewish rabbi was saying, she is looking at defining racism only through the lens of black people. And that's where she was wrong. Okay, that's where she was wrong. The fact that Hitler targeted a single race of people for annihilation. Now, I could get into whether or not if Hitler's act was racist or hatred. I won't. But I think it is certainly something worth doing. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that out because I think it's an important point that as we, especially more, we are moving forward and away from the horrible history of America, but we're not moving away from the horrible, sometimes, display of humanity. And that could happen in any group, among any group. I mean, people of any group. Okay? I'll say that again. I think I messed that up. That we certainly could, we haven't moved away from the horrible, sometimes display of racism or the hatred or the bad acts of one person or a group towards any other group. So anyway, look, guys, that is my perspective. And what do you think? I'd like to hear your opinions and your thoughts. And add them to the comments section below. And don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And don't forget that all comments are welcome. Look, the next time I see you then.